Let's turn our attention to the King and Queen's recent visit to Canada for the state opening of Parliament and Charles's first as sovereign. Now, Chris, you were there every step of the way. How was it? And an important trip, right?
Really, really important, actually. And I thought it was really quite something for the Canadians to have their king there. He's the King of Canada, which I think a lot of people don't often realise.
Yeah.
It doesn't even sound right sometimes. King of what? King of Canada. And to have him there, his first visit as king, as you say, it really was quite something. But what I got from being in Canada was the way in which they feel much more fearful of Donald Trump. We might look over the other side of the Atlantic and go, ha, he wants to make them the 51st state. But you really feel that when you're in Canada. And a lot of people say we've been united through fear. And that was what I took away from it. And the king coming to visit them and to make this speech, they saw that was him giving his support to Canadians at what is a very uncertain time.
Yeah, I mean, he touched on some key points in the speech. Now, it wasn't a speech that he wrote, it was a speech that he delivered, and we should be very clear on that. But where did he break from the script to lend his own thoughts and opinions, Chris?
So, unlike in the UK Parliament, where the government writes the whole thing, and it's like, my government will do X, Y and Z, the King had a bit of personal reflection at both the top and the bottom, and talked about how much he loves Canada, and had a little bit of Canada seeps into his heart every time he visits. And I have to say, the King, at one stage, I was standing opposite the Senate and he was listening to the national anthem, as they do. You know, we've seen that many times before. He looked really emotional. He was kind of looking at the sky. You could see the sort of tongue going into his cheek as if he was trying to hold back his emotions. Now, we don't know why he was feeling that emotional, but I think he really does have a deep love of Canada, and being there at what is a very important time and being able to make a speech, an important speech, as he did in the Senate, I think really got to him. He really did feel it.
He also mentioned but a kind of gentle nod towards President Trump. He said all Canadians can give themselves far more than any foreign power on any continent can ever take away. Quite loaded as a statement, do you think, Sarah?
Yes, except I think this was very carefully balanced and pitched in this speech, because he is the King of Canada. He was there to open Parliament, to give this speech at a time when Canada is desperately trying to fend off advances from Donald Trump. But he's also representing the UK government, who wants to get closer to Donald Trump. So he was having to balance this very carefully. And this was a speech in which he mentioned the strength, Canada being strong and free. He talked about its national unity, its sense of pride. But there were also a couple of nods towards Donald Trump that might have appealed as well in this speech, when he was talking about border security, for example, when he was talking about military spending. So I don't think this speech will have caused major offence to Donald Trump, but it certainly will have bolstered Canada's sense of sovereignty and to show its difference from its neighbour to the south, there with its head of state sitting there on the throne, the big pomp and pageantry that came with this day.
Katie, Sarah touched on there, the pomp and pageantry, and there was an abundance of that, especially given that they were literally there for less than 48 hours.
I know, Chris and I were talking about that before. I mean, it was more like, you know, it was 24 hours, and you know, I always remember to the very first royal tour to Canada I did, which was with William and Kate just after their royal wedding, and the reception was incredible. And I think every time the royals go back to Canada, there's always that sort of, well, does Canada want to be a republic? Does it want the king as head of state? And as you were discussing, with everything that's happened with Trump, that affiliation between Canada and the royals, I think on this trip felt incredibly important and significant. And when you consider what they were able to pack in that 24 hours, you know, royal welcome, procession, the carriage, the pomp and the pageantry, actually, I think it's probably making aides think, do we have to do those big sort of 8-10 day royal tours, which are gruelling for everyone involved, for the aides who have to plan it, for the royals who have to be on it, for the journalists who have to accompany it. It's expensive. I think we're sort of seeing a shift, and I think it was a state visit to the UK last year that was made shorter as well because of the King's cancer and his ongoing treatment. And I think given everything he's going through with his health, there's just something to be said about perhaps a shorter tour, because like you said, it still packs a punch. You still have all of the pageantry. You still have everything you expect of a royal tour. It still made all the front pages. There just wasn't that need to sort of drip feed it over a week-long period.
No, I agree. If you look at Australia, which after all was on the other side of the world, as you know, the King was really only there for like 4 days, and in
Short
the
for a
olden
tour
time,
of-
that was
of
very short.
Australia.
And actually, one of those was a day of rest. So like, they landed on Friday, rested, did one job on Sunday, and then basically there was 2 key days on the Monday and Tuesday. So that big trip to Australia was very short, inevitable because of the King's cancer. But I think you're right that you don't need to be there for like 9 weeks.
No.
You can do it. In this case, it was pretty much 24 hours. I was there at the airport when he landed on Monday afternoon, and he was gone by Tuesday afternoon.
It's that shorter model that the Prince and Princess of Wales have been adopting
Yes.
as well, isn't it? Because they don't want to be away from the children
Exactly, and it
for too
works.
long. They
Yeah.
can get in, they can make an impact, and they can get home again.
Yeah. And you have everything you would expect of it. I mean, even the tree planting, it's all there. It's just done on a much shorter time scale.
They're efficient with their time.
But I'm not being funny. It works for the journalists in terms of cost cutting. All of those things actually ticks the boxes. So, and it enables them to go out and be seen. So I think we're going to see more of those sorts of tours, shorter but still as effective.
And different ways of working, because we know that after this whirlwind trip, they still have plenty on in terms of the Royal Diaries, including the Queen's involvement taking a leading role in a new crime novel. And this isn't the Queen's reading room. This is something quite different, isn't it? A Peter James novel. What is her involvement, do we know?
She's taking part in this novel that is being written about Buckingham Palace. So there is, as I understand it, there is like an intruder or some part that the Queen is involved in, and he's based it around her, which is really interesting, given how much she loves literature and how much she likes to to encourage reading. I think it's a really nice touch that she's actually going to be part of the actual storyline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And has had quite a hand in it, we're told.
Yes, I mean, she's had conversations, and she's obviously got suggestions, and because she does so much reading, she clearly knows, she really knows what makes a good novel.
Absolutely. So. Well, I look forward to that. Now, the King's sister, Princess Anne, has been on important duties this week, visiting the Royal Liverpool University Hospital to thank nurses and first responders who treated those who were injured in the Liverpool parade crash. And Katie, royal visits like this are becoming really significant, aren't they? We saw that with Southport. We see it again with Liverpool.
Well, I think if you didn't have a member of the royal family going to Liverpool, I mean, let's just also point out that both the King and the Queen, the Prince and Princess of Wales, were very quick to take to social media, weren't they?
Yep.
To issue those
Yep.
messages of condolence, those messages of support. We expect that, but I think when you see a senior member of the royal family actually go and visit these emergency responders, those who have been involved in the immediate aftermath, it just adds a really, I think, important dimension to it. It enables her to go and speak to them, to thank them, to listen to them. I mean, she was actually there to go and see the naming of a ship for the Queen Anne ship. So it was meant to be a different engagement, but she couldn't have gone to Liverpool and not done that. And obviously those that were there for that visit were very grateful that she was going. But the whole idea of her going and visiting the first emergency response team was very important. I think when you think back to big disasters, Grenfell, for example, I mean, even in the Queen's era, Dunblane, if they weren't there, if they weren't going and meeting with people, it's almost like, because the nation is always behind anyone that's been subjected to something as awful as this, but the royal family is sort of the nation's voice in all of this. They represent us. We're all feeling that absolute devastation and that sense of hopelessness, but they sort of are able to personify it and go and represent all of us. And so those visits, those in-person visits, are really, really important.
Humanises it.
Exactly.
And also this happened very soon after the event. I was, for example, with the King in Southport after the dreadful killings there last year, but the King held back for as long as he could because he didn't want to get in the way of the operation. But it felt like that as you say, Princess Anne was already in the area, but it felt like it happened very quickly. And also, whilst the King was in Canada, he issued those messages of support for them as well.
And so much of that royal diary is planned so far in advance. We often think about this being a juggernaut that's quite hard to turn around, but actually they did manage to shift her entire schedule. She went straight to
Not for Princess Anne. She was just, right, I'm going.
I'm going, in I'm going.
Get me in
Yes,
there.
absolutely, because she's no fuss, you know, whatever. So she goes in, she meets the first responders, she meets the nurses, she meets the paramedics, and she is there to hear them. She often talks about herself being the King's eyes and ears, and that will have been very important. As you say, we had the statement from the King. We also had the statement from the Prince and Princess of Wales. Prince William, of course, with his role within the FA, very important to reflect on that tragedy affecting Liverpool at what should have been such a joyous celebration.